It's been a little while since I made a piece of terrain, and I feel like making like a marsh. Here's the reference art I'm using. And I've already cut this 12-inch by 12-inch piece of foam here. I'm using the 2-inch thick stuff because I think it'll be easier to carve down into this to make the marsh than it will be to build it up from a thinner piece. I've just drawn in some lines, and I just need to start kind of routing this out. And I'll begin by just using this pen style heat tool here. I'll trace through those lines and I'll go in maybe a 1/2 inch. Okay, I have that all routed as you can see, and I'm honestly just gonna start carving that out with this flathead screwdriver. Just gonna come in here and start busting that out of there. It's gonna be a mess, but it's okay. This doesn't have to be clean. You can kind of see what I'm doing here. All right, I'm making progress. Obviously it looks pretty rough. It kind of looks like a couple of like Godzilla footprints. That's pretty much what I'm going for there. Next, I'm going to use my heat gun. I'll hold the heat gun close and just use it to partially melt this foam so that the texture isn't so chunky, if you will. And it will also harden that. So I start to get this texture here, which will, after it's all flocked and painted and everything, will be great for the bottom of my swamp. I am going to do the rest of this outside though, so it's well ventilated. So this is what I have now. And the heat, as I said, sort of smoothed this out a little bit. Of course, I want it to be a rough texture. It also smoothed all these edges around where the land will meet the water. And just a really simple, quick way to create these cavities that I'll eventually fill with muck and then resin, of course. Let's get it all base coated though. And my last step for today will be just to sand flock this whole thing. Aleene's tacky glue, put a bunch of it in here. I'm gonna go a little heavy on this too. I want this to be a pretty good coat of sand. All right, that's all glued up. I got this sugar shaker at the dollar store for $1, and I just keep the sand in it, and I'm just going to shake it on. All right, it's all sanded. Of course, this needs to dry, probably overnight. There's a lot of glue in there. This is all dry and hard as concrete, and I'm just going to hit the entire thing with a coat of this really dark brown. I just used the regular Craft Smart brown and threw some black in with it. Again, not being too methodical, just sort of slapping it in there wherever. And I'll finish that up and then show you. That's all dry and it's already looking pretty good. Now I'm going to go through and do some overbrushing with this lighter shade of brown. Essentially what I'm going to be doing here is building up layers of paint, getting lighter and lighter. I'm not trying to get down into all of the crevices and places this time. You see, I'm really just hitting the topmost parts of that texture. A little heavy though. I am going in a little bit because as I also build up layers of lighter and lighter paint, I also want to add less and less of it so that my last coat of paint is just barely, just really a dry brush. All right, that's all dry. Now I have just some brown with a little bit of black in here, and I'll mix that up. I want a slightly lighter brown this time. And I'm going to add to that a little bit of this Craft Smart olive green. I just want a little bit of pull that brown a little bit to the green side of things. I'm working on, basically I'm just making mud here. It's not a pretty color, but it is a really earthy color that we have now. That's what I'm going for. And I'm going to just be doing lighter and lighter overbrushes with this paint, and I'll keep adding lighter and lighter green. I'll eventually switch to the Spanish olive, which is a slightly lighter shade, and eventually with just a little bit of the sage, which is a very pale, earthy green color. But I'm going to go ahead and just add those layers and then show you what I have. All right, there are all of my layers of paint. Looks pretty good. I am now just going to go through with my black wash and my brown wash and just kind of make a mess, basically. All right, the washes still need to dry a little bit, but that is the effect I'm going for. I really wanted a murky, muddy base to begin with, and that's all the painting. And now the next step will be to start flocking this thing.
You're going to flock it up.
I'm going to flock this thing up. It's time to start flocking this thing, and I have, again, once again, the floral moss from Dollar Tree, and I'm not going to do anything to this. This already will make great underwater plant life. I'm literally just going to start gluing it into patches in here. This whole thing is $1, and it will last me such a long time. Love the floral moss from the Dollar Tree. Look at this. It's just so great. And like I said, normally I put it in the coffee grinder. I will put some in the grinder and grind it up into finer powder, but these plants will look great all sprinkled in within the bottom here. So what I'm going to do basically is just take some Eileen's tacky glue here, and I will just start to, I'll put some in there, and I'll take some of the floral moss and just stick it down in that glue. And I'll just keep doing that. I'll show you when I've got it all in. All right, as you can see, I have the vine-like flocking. I left where the water will be, and then I used my coffee grinder to grind it up and create the land flocking, and I got that all glued down. You may notice I sort of kept it thin so you can still see that ground texture showing through. I need to let this dry, and then I'm going to take my black and my brown wash and just muddy it up quite a bit, and I'll come back and show you when I've done that. The washes are all dry. You can see I just sort of used it to really make this look more muddy. And that's going to do it for the main part of the flocking. I am going to hit this with a clear coat before I pour my resin, just so I can seal in all of the flocking. I do want to have like a really gnarled tree stump. So then I have these two pieces here. Next I will turn once again to the trusty old pen style heat tool. Again, this will be my root system here. So I'm just going to basically carve that out like so. So I've created this basic shape. I'm now going to use some acetone and a cotton swab to go in here and make this look a little bit more organic. I'll use it to sort of soften all of those edges. And I'm just going to kind of streak it down the side here so you can see the texture and the pattern that it's taking on here now. I'll base coat this now. So my next move was to go in, and I'm just doing some like hot glue bark, if you will, on this. I'm slowly squeezing the trigger and just laying in little thin strings and beads of different widths and thicknesses, and I'm going to hit that with a second coat of the base. All right, that's all dry, ready to go. I'm going to just hit all the outside with a dark brown, like a dark chocolate, and all this interior part with the golden brown. Again, this doesn't necessarily have to be a complete cover. I do actually want the black from the base to still be able to show through a bit. Let's let that all dry. Suede for the dry brush. Let this completely dry, really, really dry, and then we'll do our washes. I will start off with a coat of my homemade black wash first. Next, I'll lay on some of my homemade brown wash. And just kind of a little bit less coverage this time, just sort of here and there. Okay, that's all dry and looking really good, I think. I need to do some flocking on here, make this thing look mossy. And there we have that. Again, this is just the ground up floral moss. I'm very pleased with the way this looks, although I think it could use one more thing. What could it be?
Mushrooms!
And there it is. I have some mushrooms growing in there, and I made some more shelf fungus for the outside. I am very, very pleased with the effect here. I'm going to have it here probably, and then the water, when I pour the resin, it'll be in and around the base of this, and I'll flock it in with more of this to kind of blend it, and maybe I'll have some little critters in there. But that's the little tree stump piece that I wanted to add to the swamp build. All right, I'm ready to begin pouring my resin in to make my water effects. And for that, I use this stuff. I get it on Amazon. It's cheap, it's effective, non-toxic, high gloss, super easy to work with. I am going to do this in layers though, so I'll get the first layer done today because I want to build up layers of color. I'm going to add little critters in here as I go, and plus it's kind of deep and I don't want to get too many air bubbles. So this is a slow process. I'll pour the first layer today. It will take 24 hours to cure, and then we will come back and do the second layer and so on. The cup has the nice little measuring lines on the side, 50 mil of the A and 50 mil of the B. I'm going to pour this into another container to stir this. I'm not adding any color on the first layer. I just want it to be clear. Give it a good stir for probably about a minute. And I'm just going to start pouring it into the piece. All right, I've got it all poured. I'll use this popsicle stick and I'm just going to push it around and make sure it gets into all the little recesses. Even it out a little bit. Really make sure it's kind of evenly distributed. Really want to make sure I push it down into the little spaces in the base of my tree stump. It's already looking pretty cool. And then I'm going to use my heat gun. I do have bubbles in here, and I can just quickly, I don't want to focus my heat on any foam places. I don't want to remelt that foam. But it doesn't take much heat at all to just go through and pops all those bubbles pretty quickly. I'm not too worried about some bubbles. This is a swamp. There will be some bubbles in a swamp, of course. But I don't want it to be really overly bubbly, so no big deal. I'm not going to obsess over this as much as I might other pieces. And I will want to check this, every 15 or 20 minutes for quite some time, probably the next several hours, just to see if any other bubbles have come. There's also a trick. You could spritz it with alcohol, and that also pops the bubbles. You can also I've used a lighter in the past. A flame will do it, but heat gun does just fine, and I don't have any alcohol. So. But there you have our first layer of resin, and that will take 24 hours to cure. And then we will come back and lay our second layer. This is all cured now. It's been 24 hours. My next step right now is I'm just going to go through and brush on some dark brown and green washes, just sort of randomly in different places, so that this is not so clear, but I also want it to still be rather clear. I'm really just going to I'm using the Agrax Earth Shade. You could just use any dark brown wash. Really, the gray doesn't matter, but I just like this. And I'm brushing this one pretty much everywhere. I don't want this to be crystal clear exactly. I want it to be a little muddy, so when I lay on the second coat of resin, it will be buried in there and just reduce the clarity enough. Just turn it to the brown a little bit. I'm not going to add any color to my resin because I want to be able to see through pretty well. So this is just between the layers. If I only were pouring one layer of resin, I probably would have just added the brown color to it. But as I'm pouring two, I prefer this method. Now that that's all dry, I plan to add some little fauna to my swamp build. And I asked Matthew Prince, who's a friend of the channel and a patron, if I could commission him to make some little fish. I got a little turtle here and frogs and things that I can sprinkle throughout my swamp. And I also got this awesome flail snail. So I'm just going to tack those in around before I pour my second layer of resin, because I want these obviously to mostly be underwater. And I'll just keep tacking these little critters in here and there wherever I need them. See there, I have some little fish, and we'll come back to pour the second layer of resin. Okay, with the fishies all tacked in, it is time to pour the second layer of resin. There it is, looking pretty great. I'm not sure, I got a lot of reflection here, so I don't know if you can see my fish in there, but I'm really happy. I added a little bit of resin, just few drops inside the top of that tree stump where there may be some water that's collected in there. But just like yesterday, again, I'm going to use the heat gun on this maybe every 10 or 15 minutes for an hour or so, just till all the major bubble situations are taken care of. But there is that. And my second layer of resin is totally cured. Now, I didn't show you, but I added these little sticks here as well. Now we're ready to start adding some finishing touches. For starters, I would like some dead leaves in and about here, but these are just a little out of scale, so I need to make some leaves. I could just take all of these and crumble them up and sort of sprinkle them in wherever, and that would work just fine. But I happen to have this handy dandy little Green Stuff World leaf punch. So I'm going to take it and just punch smaller leaves out of these bigger leaves. Now, I actually went through and gave these a rather generous coating of the Krylon matte finish clear coat so that they'd be a little bit more durable, especially standing up to being punched. I think real leaf makes the best looking fake leaf, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll punch a bunch of leaves out with this. So I have my little leaf here, and I'll take my leaf punch out some little leaves. And there is my little leaf pile. So I'm going to take these and just start gluing them in to the swamp. I can just treat this like any other flocking, and I will just paint on some glue. I imagine leaves kind of gathering here in this little place. Sprinkle the leaves into the glue. Make sure I press them down and tap off the extra. And we're getting some leaves. So the glue still needs to dry on all of those, but you can already see how that little touch with the leaves really adds a little touch of dimension that helps to sell the look of the piece. Matthew also made me this amazing teeny tiny little turtle, and I think I'm going to have her sitting right here on this log. I'll just put a little hot glue and tack her down. I love it. I have a couple other little critters here I'm going to place here and there, some frogs and some snails. I'm also going to take more of the floral moss flocking and just create some additional embellishments. I'll do all that and then show you what I've done. All right, I have all of that extra flocking tacked in there. Added my little turtle and a little frog over here, a couple of frogs, and I have a little snail in there, and of course the flail snail awaiting our party. But I'm going to say this piece is complete. I'm very, very pleased with the results, and I'm going to put it up on my Etsy shop today. So it's there now if you're interested.